I always thought the idea of traveling alone was romantic. The freedom, the adventure, the solitude. I had never been afraid of being on my own, but this trip made me rethink everything. It started innocently enough. A week off work, a cabin in the woods, and a chance to disconnect. I found the place online, a small, rustic cabin deep in the forest. The pictures showed a charming, quaint retreat, perfect for some much-needed peace and quiet. The drive was uneventful, long stretches of road winding through increasingly dense woods. By the time I arrived, the sun was setting, casting long shadows through the trees. The cabin was exactly as advertised, if not a bit more isolated than I had anticipated. There were no other houses nearby, just the thick forest pressing in on all sides. The first night was uneventful. I made a simple dinner, read a book by the fireplace, and went to bed early. It wasn't until the next day that things started to feel off. I woke up to the sound of birds chirping and the sun streaming through the window. It was peaceful, almost too peaceful. I spent the morning exploring the area around the cabin. There were no trails, just dense underbrush and towering trees. It was beautiful, but I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, the feeling of unease grew stronger. I tried to distract myself with a movie, but the cabin's Wi-Fi was spotty at best. Frustrated, I gave up and decided to go to bed early again. That's when I heard it. A faint rustling sound outside, barely audible over the crackling of the fire. I brushed it off as an animal, but the sound continued, growing louder and more insistent. I peered out the window, but the darkness was impenetrable. I could see nothing beyond the dim glow of the porch light. Trying to convince myself it was nothing, I locked the doors and windows and went to bed. Sleep didn't come easily. Every creak and groan of the cabin set my nerves on edge. I must have finally drifted off, but I woke suddenly in the middle of the night. The cabin was silent, the kind of silence that feels heavy, oppressive. I lay there listening, straining to hear any sound. Then I heard it again, a soft, almost imperceptible whisper, like the rustling of leaves. It was coming from outside my window. I told myself it was the wind, but deep down I knew better. My heart pounded in my chest as I crept to the window. I hesitated, then peeked through the curtains. At first, I saw nothing but darkness. Then, as my eyes adjusted, I saw movement, a shadow slipping between the trees. I recoiled, heart racing. It had to be my imagination. There was no one out here, no one but me. I forced myself to lie back down, but sleep was impossible. Every noise, every flicker of movement outside the window kept me on edge. The next morning, I was exhausted. I decided to go for a hike, hoping the exercise would clear my head. I left the cabin, following a rough path that led deeper into the woods. The feeling of being watched persisted, but I pushed it aside, determined to enjoy the beauty around me. I didn't go far, just enough to stretch my legs. As I turned to head back, I saw something that made my blood run cold. A small clearing, hidden from view, with a circle of stones in the center. Inside the circle was a crude, makeshift altar with what looked like animal bones scattered around it. I backed away, heart pounding. This was no ordinary forest. Something was wrong here, something I couldn't explain. I hurried back to the cabin, every snap of a twig and rustle of leaves making me jump. When I got back, I locked the doors and windows again, checking them twice. I tried to convince myself it was just a hunter's setup, but it felt sinister. I spent the rest of the day inside, nerves on edge. As night fell, the feeling of dread intensified. I tried to distract myself with a book, but I couldn't concentrate. Every noise outside made me jump. I decided to call it a night early, hoping sleep would come more easily this time. It didn't. I woke in the middle of the night again, the cabin filled with an eerie silence. I lay there, listening, straining to hear anything. Then I heard it, the soft whispering sound from the night before, closer this time. I couldn't ignore it any longer. I grabbed a flashlight and crept to the window. The beam of light pierced the darkness, illuminating the trees outside. At first, I saw nothing. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw movement, a figure, slipping through the shadows. I froze, the flashlight shaking in my hand. The figure moved closer, slipping between the trees, always just out of reach of the light. I backed away from the window, heart pounding. This was no animal. Someone was out there. I locked the bedroom door and sat on the bed, flashlight in hand. Minutes passed, then hours. The whispering continued, growing louder, more insistent. It seemed to be coming from all around the cabin now, a chorus of voices just beyond the walls. As dawn approached, the voices faded. Exhausted, I finally fell into a fitful sleep. When I woke, the sun was high in the sky. I knew I couldn't stay here another night. I packed my things, throwing them haphazardly into my bag. As I stepped outside, I felt a presence, a weight pressing down on me. I hurried to my car, glancing nervously at the trees. The forest seemed to watch me, the silence oppressive. I started the engine and drove away, the cabin receding into the distance. As I left the forest behind, I felt the weight lift, but the memory of those whispers stayed with me. I'll never know what was out there, what watched me from the shadows, but one thing is certain, I'll never travel alone again.